Well, we're back again with Michael Gerloff, so thank you, Mike, for coming back to XO News TV.
It's my pleasure, Michael.
So in the first interview we did, you described the recruitment process and how this Marine captain said they had been watching you for a very long time. So I'm very interested in what it is about your background that may have been of interest to the US Marine Corps. So why don't we begin with the very first event that you can recall about your early life?
Are you referring to age 3 when... Okay, very good. To touch on the question you just asked me, I believe, well, I know that I have certain psychic abilities. That has been something that has been a part of my life from a very young age. For me, the realization that I was living a slightly different life than my family and friends was I could see certain things and experience certain things that other people didn't. I came to know that at age 3 when I don't have any better description than the term dog man came to visit me when I was right at 3 years old. I woke up in the middle of the night one night and something had me by my inner groin on my left leg, squeezing very hard, causing a great deal of pain. And I woke up and sat up in bed, and there sitting at the foot of my bed with a grip on my left leg was a humanoid-looking figure, but it was a dog. It had the head of a dog, it had the arms and, with hair on them, paws, but they looked like hands. This dog more had the facial appearance of a kind of a hound dog, or maybe even like a Labrador retriever. It wasn't mean or vicious looking. When this entity woke me up, it frightened me so much that I left my body. That was the first time I remember leaving my body in that way. I fled my body. I went up to the corner of my bedroom, and I could view myself sitting in the bed, staring at this being that was there with me. Now, it's important to point out that this being had, like Yoda or, a character in Star Wars, it had a hooded type cloak. The hood came out, kind of out past its face a little bit, but I could still see the facial construction, and it was definitely a dog. After I fled my body, I observed myself in the bed, and I could see the backside of this entity that was in the room with me. I eventually went back to my body and was thinking, what is going on? Well, this entity began speaking to me, and it was not through vocalization. This was telepathic communication. And this entity let me know that we know who you are. We're going to be watching you, and we're going to be coming to visit you more and more. And he warned me, and he used the term they when he was speaking with me, or using telepathic communication. He warned me against telling my parents or anyone that I knew that they were coming to visit and that they would be coming more in the future. After that, those visitations continued, during the week 2 or 3 times for quite a long time. That would go on for some time. I realized then at age 3 that this was something I couldn't speak to my family about because at that young age I knew that if I brought this up, they would think something was wrong. So I did. I kept it to myself. Dogman was typically the visitor that came the most, but there were times, and I don't know any better term to use than shadow man. It was a black entity. It had the kind of a form of a human, but not quite the detail and the perfect shape of a human. And it would come into my room and float around in my room, go to the walls and move around the room on my walls. I never felt like it communicated with me directly like Dogman did. It seemed more like it was there to intimidate me in some way or frighten me in some way. And over time, I have to say, I got very used to this. It didn't frighten me anymore. It became a regular part of my life that in a strange way, I almost look forward to their visits because it was kind of like a friend in a way coming to visit me.
intrigued.
So, go ahead.
I'm very intrigued by what you were told by this entity, this dog man. We know who you are. What might that mean, especially given what you said about your very first memories of your mother?
Well, that's a great question. This is one of the more uncomfortable parts of this for me to talk about, but I have to own it. It is my memory. Just simply put, Michael, I remember my moment of awareness, my moment of being aware that I existed inside this body, was when this body was a little over 2 years old. I have a very clear, distinct memory of coming here to this planet, traveling down to the planet from space, through the clouds. I traveled, I'm not sure where I entered, I'm trying to figure out the best way to put it. I'm not sure exactly where on the planet I arrived, but I traveled, above the ground, almost on automatic pilot. I wasn't consciously navigating to go somewhere. It was as if something was drawing me to a particular location. Now, I grew up in central Missouri, nowhere near St. Louis or Kansas City, but I arrived in St. Louis, Missouri. I came down into the city. I could see the buildings and, the ground below me, and I eventually came to a hotel with a big swimming pool, and I could see a group of people in the pool having fun, splashing, and enjoying a nice spring or summer day. I came down over the pool and I saw a little boy, again probably around 2 years old, because that's the age that I remember this occurring. This little boy was sitting on the shoulders of a man who was jumping up and down, and they were splashing and having fun. And I remember hanging there for a while and just watching this little boy have a great time. He was in a moment of great glee and joy, splashing, and you could tell this was an exciting moment. I went inside that little boy, and I have been inside that housing or that shell, whatever you want to call it, ever since. The significant part of this day, Michael, it was the first day that I met my mother. It was the first day that I met my family with the consciousness that I have, that I represent. I had not met these people before. A strong memory of that day was when my mother called for the gentleman, who I later found out was an uncle of mine, that I was sitting on the shoulders of. My mother said, "Hey, bring Mike over here." And he took me over to the edge of the pool. She lifted me out, wrapped a towel around me, and hugged me. And that was the first time I put my face in the crook of her neck and smelled the smell of my mother and actually met her.
That's fascinating. So we are talking about a possible walk-in situation, and this raises the question, and this is something that Dogman said to you, we know who you are, so who might you be? I mean, is he referring to some kind of interdimensional entity, an ET?
I'm not positive on that. My education on terms like a walk-in, I had never heard that term until months ago. That's something I recently discovered, and that's so strongly tied to my memories of being aware and being present here. I have the sense, and it has been my belief since I've been a child and all through my life, that I came here for a particular reason, that I came here for a mission, so to speak. I came here to observe. I came here to feel what was going on this planet, and to somehow find a way to be part of, monitoring the planet, and at the same time be of aid in some way to humanity. The interdimensional aspect of it, I don't know how to articulate what I feel about that, but I will say this. I feel like that entity knew that I came from elsewhere, and that they were monitoring me. They were checking up on me. I also believe that the certain psychic abilities I have, I believe I'm an intuitive empath. I have great intuition. I can be around people, and I can feel who they are, what they are. without really having conversations with them. I sense things about people. I've been that way my whole life. With regard to the SSP, I strongly believe that those traits are traits that they were seeking for candidates in these programs. And I truly, sincerely believe that they had a way of identifying those of us that have those traits, and that they engaged us as children.
So that really raises the question then, in terms of the very first indication that you may have been recognized by higher authorities, military authorities that were connected to a Navy secret space program. You've described being in third grade, and there was some testing that you were subjected to. Can you just explain how you came to participate in those tests and what was the result?
Yes, in third grade, I was an average student in school. Probably in grade school, I was a little above average. School kind of was boring to me. There were aspects of it that I didn't like all that much. I enjoyed it nonetheless. One day in third grade, my third grade teacher came to my desk, and it was during a time when the class we were doing, like an arts and crafts project. And she had the entire class busy doing that. And she came and got me and asked me to come with her. And she took me to a location where she said, look, we have this special test that we want to give you. And she kind of described how it would go. I was a little confused by that. And, she said, look, this is this kind of a special test. And she described the components of it. It was 3 distinct parts to the test. I remember she had this box of testing materials, and they were really well produced. This was like a well thought out design testing kit that was used for this process. The first part of the test, she would take flashcards and hold them up for just a few seconds and lay them down, and then take another one and flash it up to me. And I think we started at 4 characters. This involved numeric and alphanumeric characters that the idea of the test was how much of the string of these characters could you remember. And we started at about 4, and we started working our way up. And as we got along the way, she started asking, I was reciting them, remembering them and doing them accurately. And then she asked me, can you recite these backwards? And I was surprised in my ability to be able to do that. It was like I was containing, the memory of the characters or images, or in some way I was remembering that, and I was kind of astounded by it. I recall we got up to about 16 characters, and then the test stopped. And then we moved on to the next phase of the test. That involved, she would take a big flashcard and show me a complex geometric shape and let me look at it for a while. And then she would put the card down and lay out other cards on the table, and then ask me to assemble the previous geometric shape out of the shapes that were available. And I would do that. I would pick the ones that would create that shape. We did that several times. My sense was that I was doing well on that as well. That, because she had a look on her face like, wow, you're doing really well on this. That part of the test, we concluded that. And then we got to the final part of the test, which involved, and she described it to me in this way. These are going to be words that you've never seen before. It's almost like they're made up words, kind of like gibberish or something like that. I'm going to flash the card to you, and I want you to just instinctively pronounce the word the best way that you know how. Now, these words had a lot of X's and Z's and, characters like that in it, which, that can be, for a kid in third grade, that could be a little difficult. I hadn't been around a lot of words like that. But I was just naturally pronouncing the words, and, we got to the end of the test, and she thanked me. Never really gave me an indication as to how well I had done, and let me go back to my class.
And you did a similar test in 5th grade.
Yes, I did. It was almost identical. Right. Almost identical. I was pulled again from the class given this quite similar test, very much like the first one. And then many years went by. I know we're jumping ahead a little bit, but many years went by. And when I was 17 years old, now this woman who was my third grade teacher, I had become friends with her son. And, you know, we hung out a lot together and went to concerts and things like that. And because I was kind of around her household and present a lot in her life, she called me one day at home. You know, I think she had familiarity with me, so it made it easier for her. She called me one day at home and asked me if I would be willing to take an IQ test. And she explained to me at the time that she was going through an extension program through the University of Missouri, and part of that was learning how to give different types of standardized and IQ testing. And of course I wanted to help her. I really like this woman. In fact, she's alive today. And I want to point out before I continue, I went a couple months ago and actually spoke to her about this. And she remembered giving me the test at age 17. The first test in third grade, she didn't remember the exact incident of giving me the test, but as I described the test to her, she went, "Oh, you're describing the tests for the gifted programs that were in place at the time." And she goes, "Yes, I remember giving those tests, and so what you're telling me is that I gave you that test." And I felt, you know, she was verifying from my memory that I actually participated in that. So, you know, that was good for me. But back to at age 17, I went to her home, and, you know, it took 3-4 hours to take this test. And it was unlike any, you know, I've taken, I guess, IQ tests before. This was unlike any one I had ever done. It was much like the earlier tests that I had taken as a child. It all seemed to deal more with spatial reasoning. It wasn't pure math. It wasn't pure English. It was more about geometric shapes and how to logically think through different problems. I hope I'm making sense there. But I took that test, and again, after I got done, she told me, "I think you've done really well on this." And to further that, when I went and saw her a couple months ago, I asked her again, you know, "How well did I do on that?" And she goes, "Oh, you did quite well." But she couldn't remember a score or anything like that to reference that. So I took the test and went on about my business.
So we're talking about age 17, you take this third test, you do very well, and this is part of her doing a university program, and she describes that to you. But then approximately a year later, you have this flying triangle sighting, and then a few days later, you enlist in the US Marine Corps, and then when you go to boot camp, then you're asked if you are wanting to join the Marine Space Program.
Yes.
So this suggests that this testing was actually a part of the way for them to get to know you and see whether you're aptitude, because it does seem like they had already identified you as someone suitable for their program.
Yes, I believe that, Michael. I believe that this journey began for me as a child, and jumping up to when the Marine captain during the recruitment made the comment, "We've been observing or watching you for some time." I connected that during that conversation to the memories of that testing. That it lent itself to making me believe that I had been under observation and had been of interest to them for some time.
One of the common themes in the testimony of many others who have had interactions with ETs or been part of the secret space program is the role of genetics in all of this.
Yes.
Now, in your case, you described that incident at age 2 and the subsequent interest by these entities, Dogman and Shadow Man and so forth. So I'm just wondering whether there's something about your genetics which is unique, which disposes you to this kind of secret space program service, because you've done some recent genetic testing, right? And you found what appears to be a very big difference between your genetic profile and that of your parents.
Yes, I have. A few months ago, I was curious about it, and I thought I'd take advantage of the the DNA testing that is available out there. I sent my mother, my father, and my sample off, and when I got back the results, I was absolutely astounded at the difference. You would think that your DNA would be representative of the DNA of your parents, and that if, you know, let's say, for example, if your father's 100% German or something like that, and if your mother was 50% German, there would be a percentage that would, you know, work that out. And when I got the results back, without being really specific about it, my DNA results are very different from my parents. For example, my mother and my father is listed in his test as 58% Scandinavian. My mother, I believe, was 21% Scandinavian. My test shows me as 70% Scandinavian, which makes no sense to me if you understand how the DNA and the genetics should work. And there are other parts to it that are very different.
This does raise the issue of epigenetics, whereby a person's thoughts or behaviors influence their genetics. Now, interestingly, you mentioned you're close to 70% Scandinavian DNA. That raises the question, well, whatever your background is, may it be related to what many others have described as Nordic extraterrestrials or a Nordic influence in some way? You know, is this a reasonable hypothesis in your case?
I believe so. Knowing what I've learned in recent months as I've gotten more exposure to the subject matter and the connection to the Nordics, the SSP connection, possible connection to the Nordics, I have wondered about that. You know, if that's a connection to me, I can't say with great certainty that, you know, I know that to be a case, but it sure makes me wonder. It makes me wonder if that's not a part of the story in some way.
Certainly that's what William Tompkins says happened with the US Navy's secret space program, that these Nordic extraterrestrials played a role in the choosing individuals to play leadership roles in the Navy's program. So there does seem to be a Nordic connection with this Navy space program.
Right. I do want to point out another facet of my childhood that I think is important to point out, Michael. You know, the visitations from Dog Man and Shadow Man, that started at about age 3, and, you know, that waned at a certain point. I got up to 6 or 7, and that began to fade away. It sort of got replaced by these memories and this sense that when I was in bed at sleep time, I would wake up in the morning, and this happened quite frequently. I would wake up in the morning and have this feeling and these memories of being around other children, of being around military personnel, uniformed military personnel that were there sort of in the, not in the shadows, but just off to the edges, monitoring and supervising us children. It was like I was going to a school at nighttime. And I'm not saying that I believe I was being physically removed from my mother and father's home. It was more like my consciousness was traveling to a classroom setting. And I was just naturally going there and learning and being taught certain things. I even remember memories of having instructors and teachers that were there teaching us different things. I wish I could be really specific to you about what they were teaching us. My memories don't provide that. But the memories of leaving home and going elsewhere at night, that stuck with me for a long time, up to probably age 11. From 6 or 7 up to age 11 or 12. Those are very strong memories for me.
We've had a number of other secret space program whistleblowers, insiders, who have described being taken out of school and being put through a training regimen. But in your case, it seems that this was happening at night.
Yes.
So, you know, that raises the question, are we talking about different programs that are doing this, or is this, were you being taken by, say, another worldly faction?
I can honestly say that I have no memories of being physically removed from my school, no memories of, being taken out of my mother and father's home in the physical sense. It seems like there are differences in what some of the whistleblowers are describing and relating. I can't really speak to what the other people are saying. I can only relate my experiences. And it sounds to me, or it feels to me like it was through my consciousness. It was in a more out-of-body, light-body sense, if you will, that I was going and attending these courses. And I don't know how to really relate to what the other whistleblowers have described because it's not my experience.
Sure. Well, so now we have pretty much caught up with the time when you then enlisted in the Marine Corps, and you've earlier described what happened when you first got to boot camp and then were inducted into this covert space program. So now what we'll do when we come back for the next segment is to take up from where you left off in terms of you're now beginning boot camp, working with your partners or with your peers in completing boot camp and then going on to serve with the US Marine Corps. So we'll be back in the next episode. So thank you again, Mike.